Hey, welcome to the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast with me, Rob Kosberg. Every week, I interview thought leaders and experts who have used a book to grow their income and their impact. So tune in weekly for these interviews so you can learn how to use your own best-selling book and go from hunting for clients and opportunities to instead being the hunted. Hey, all right. Welcome, everybody. It's Rob Kosberg here. Excited to bring you another episode of the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast with yet another fantastic guest. I have Randy Dewey here today. Randy is the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of When the Unthinkable Happens, How to Lead Your Team and Pivot Your Business for Growth and Opportunity. Randy is terrific for many reasons, and I think you'll learn quite a bit. He's a 30-year Csuite executive. He's worked in 10 different companies all over the place, 9 different sectors, 32 different countries, and having flown over 1 million miles. Even just hearing that makes me shudder just a little bit. I hate the idea of that. I'm not scared of flying. I just don't want to. He has created his LIFT program, which is Lead, Inspire, Focus, and Transform. He founded LIFT Leadership as a consulting and educational practice to C-suite and C-suite leaders. And very, very excited, Randy, to have you on, and look forward to diving in deep into the LIFT principles and talk to you a little bit about your experience in the C-suite.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for having me today. It's great. Great to be with you.
So, Randy, I know a little bit more than a little before we got on because we were fortunate enough to work with Randy on his book, but 11 kids. And Randy has 11 children by the same wife, I might add.
Yeah.
So it's kind of important maybe to mention that. 8 different cities your kids were. Let me just start here because this is something that always intrigues me. Why the C-suite? I mean, it's a sacrificial life. You've been a turnaround expert, really, right? You've gone into struggling companies. You worked with Blackstone. That sent you into struggling companies. Most people should know what Blackstone is, largest asset manager in the world, if I'm not mistaken, or one of them, 7 or 8 trillion under management. Why? Why the C-suite? A lot of sacrifice in that. Let's start there.
Yeah, sure. So, in the early parts of my career, I came out of college and I was just, I got my first job and I really, I had some really interesting sort of conversations with certain C-suite people. And as I started to realize the power and the influence that they had, sort of get enamored with the idea of, leading large groups of people through difficult times. And I was always a history buff. So I'd read so many stories over the years about, people that have led people through tumult and difficulty and how they did it. And as well, keeping your moral compass in check as you went along the way, really inspired me. And so I sort of set my mind at a very young age that I was going to do whatever it took to crawl to the top. And I crawled to the top. I spent time in human resources and operations and sales and marketing and finance. And I finally got my way up into the C-suite. And then I spent a few years in different functions in the C-suite and then ultimately into the job of CEO. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in turnarounds, and I kind of gravitated to it only by chance because I fell into a business that was in Chapter 11. I knew it was going to file because Blackstone and others had told me that they were in the throes of that. But for me, I just took the opportunity and thought, you know what, I will make my way here. And oddly, I got into that job, and it was really difficult because within the first couple of months, as you filed, and then as you got your dip financing, all of a sudden people started leaving from around the boardroom table. And ultimately, I was the last guy standing on the management team. And, the folks from New York flew in and, wondering what was going on. And they just asked me to keep the tires on and help that company through the tumult while they replaced the people that had left. And sure enough, they replaced everybody but the president. And I had that battlefield promotion and I just loved it. And they loved me doing it because we were able to get through in record time, got the company restructured, went from negative, eight figures per year in EBITDA to positive eight figures in a very short period of time. And then we sold the business for nine figures. So
wow.
Here was a company that was, ready to go away and then turned around and got sold for a handsome profit. So anyways, that set a course for me working with PE firms, going through and just helping them with those troubled assets. And, oftentimes it's not so much a matter of, as I came to learn, it's not a fault of management. It's sometimes a fault in circumstance of situations. Sometimes it's too much turnover within management. The business starts to lose its way. And as I did these 10 turnarounds over these period, over these 3 decades, I started seeing the commonality, the themes that were in there. And I started finding myself repeating the process. And that's when I realized that, what, there's a book in here and there's a method to the madness and the things that I do. And so when I started formalizing that, so I always sort of had it on my sort of to-do list that I wanted to write a book, and the time became now. And as I was pivoting again from out of the C-suite into a consultative role and advisory role. And so that's when I put the book in place and wrote it. And thanks to you and your firm, got it out there.
Well, it's certainly done well. The book was launched not long ago. It hit Wall Street Journal bestseller, top on the list, number 3 or 4 on the Wall Street Journal list, USA Today bestseller, number 1 on Barnes & Noble overall. So congratulations on all of that. I mean, the book is definitely resonating with people.
Yeah, thank you. And I think partially because there's a real world element to it. Like I wrote in every chapter a story of it was from the trenches. It was a battlefield story. When I talked about sales and marketing or reporting and finance or restructuring or how to get the business strategy fixed and corrected, there was a story in every chapter. And then I took a historical story because as I said earlier, I'm a history. And I love the fall of Constantinople and some of the things that happened. So I kind of took a historical story and sort of themed it through the book as well to help some of the lessons of the past be the teacher of today. And so, it was a real fun project. I relished it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, congrats again. The title, When the Unthinkable Happens, talk to me about some of the unthinkable things that you have found yourself in, if you can, because, the first thought, everybody will have a different first thought when they see that title. Like, what does that even mean? It could mean, the times I had terrible financial trouble because I owned a real estate company during 2007 and 2008 during the financial crisis, and we couldn't get funding, we couldn't close deals, et cetera. So talk to me about some of these unthinkable things. And then from there, I'm going to want to talk about, okay, what are some of the patterns that you saw as far as fixing them?
Sure. So my story comes from the same era and period that you're talking about, because I went into a bank and it was 8 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed. Wow. And I was, the COO of the bank, and it was an interesting, I had come from automotive and a bunch of other manufacturing companies and found myself in a bank, which was kind of interesting in and of itself, not with a lot of banking background. But then 8 weeks later, Lehman Brothers collapsed. And then, of course, we watched 400 some odd banks go into disappear from the world as a result of the subprime mortgage crisis. But what was interesting is that in the course of that job, the CEO unfortunately had made a bit of a fumble, and he ended up losing his job as a result of that. And here I was now, battlefield promotion, and I talk about the story in the book, but he actually got taken out by the government because the bank was at risk of falling, and in Canada we hadn't had any banks fall, so it was a super important period of time. Anyways, here I am now faced with, the unthinkable moment was here I am in the midst of a sector, never been in before, in a bank, in the middle of the worst banking crisis in modern times. And all of a sudden, overnight, disappears the CEO. And now I'm leading the bank through the worst crisis that it certainly had faced in modern times. So, for me, it's always, and it's kind of resonates with a lot of the other stories. They just are different stories. But the one theme is that, a crisis is not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And are you prepared for it? And when it does happen, what do you do with it? And how do you then shepherd the business through the difficulty, and then take it, not just in an element of survival, but it's really, how can you actually take this situation within the obstacles and then find the opportunity for growth and scale within there? It's not just, let's get through this, guys. It's like, let's just get through this, but become stronger as a result of it. And then let's take whatever it is, themes or difficulties or opportunities or whatever the market suggests that, is our new place in that new market. How do we then capitalize on the circumstance, not just try and weather it? So that's been, I guess, part of the theme of my life. So when the unthinkable happens, is really just a call towards those moments in time where unthinkable things just happen in business. And how do you then handle it, and how do you take it to grow?
We just came out of a global pandemic. Well, I guess if you ask some, we haven't come out of it yet, but we certainly are maybe not as much in the throes of it as we were. And, I remember when that began, I think it was the second week of March, I was watching the Players' Championship on TV, and Hideki Matsuyama, I'm a big golf fan, shot 9 under the first day, and the second day they canceled it. And I was like, they just canceled the Players' Championship? I'm like, what is going on? And of course, that was for me, everybody probably had a different experience, but to me, all of that was a whole new kind of era of something unthinkable happening. It led to some wonderful things for my business from the standpoint of, we became a virtual company, which is something I'd always wanted but was afraid of. We were forced into that because of the shutting down of businesses, et cetera. So maybe if you could talk to me about whether it's your lift process or whether it's just another type of steps or process when something unthinkable happens to then turn that to a positive. What are the things that you look for and that you do to create the positive experience?
Well, now is kind of like the perfect example of this, because you're right. An unthinkable situation happened. I remember when they said, "Oh, we're going to, flatten the curve. It's just a couple weeks, couple months. Right. Really." And here it was 2 years in the making before the things really started to sort of iron out a little bit. And I know we're not quite there yet, but it was an unthinkable circumstance. And again, it's not a matter of if; it's just a matter of when. But then within the circumstances, how do you find your way to actually find growth and opportunity? You did, in your sense, you were able to pivot your business in a direction you always wanted to go, but never did it for whatever reason. But now the circumstance, provided you an opportunity for you to take advantage of it. And everybody in the company, as you know, rallied around the new change because it was the reality of the outside world that was forcing the circumstances. So you get a lot of inherent sort of energy within the company to make those changes and those pivots. I think today we're seeing that things improve because of COVID, but it's not gone. And there's lots of things that are about to happen. In my view, I think there's another big wave. If you look just as a data point, in the last 18 months, it's been a historic low in bankruptcies for business. Why? Because we've had government stimulus propping companies up, the Paycheck Protection Program, and there's an enormous amount of, stimulus going on. But that gravy train, so to speak, is going to end soon. And then we're now, companies are expected to stand on their own 2 feet without any government support, but the markets still haven't completely returned. So then what do? We still have, ocean liners stacked up on the West Coast and unable to get processed into, LAX or into any of the ports all along the Western seaboard. And they said that, I was reading the article the other day, I was saying, if you'd lined up all the shipping containers back to back, you could run them all the way from LA to Chicago and back. That's how many, and the collective wait time on the water is now over 50 years collectively. If you added up all the waiting that all those ships have been doing, you've got that happening. So you got supply chain interruption, you got silicon problems because of silicon factories that were down. So now you have chip problems, and you've got a lot of things that have affected a lot of different sectors, and those things aren't fixed. Like, just because COVID's now, the vaccines are working and we're starting to see some of the improvement, there's still going to be a ripple effect. So the question then becomes, okay, knowing this is coming, knowing what's going to happen, and some of the ideas you certainly could play out in your market, what do you do about it? Like, are you going to, have to switch your supply chain? Are you going to have to find new routes? Are you going to repatriate manufacturing back to the US, which is sorely needed in some industries?
Right.
too much offshore going on anyway. So do we then find a way to repatriate back? And then if we have more made in America products, how does that then translate into margins? And how do you then get your end customers actually embrace the cost improvement? And what do you do to actually pass through some of that so you maintain your margins, but yet maintain supply and maybe an improvement in quality or your offering? And so I think there's a lot of very important questions businesses need to be asking themselves, not just saying, okay, let's just hang on long enough for for COVID to go away and then everybody to come running back like they were the day before COVID broke out. It never works that way.
Right.
How do you then take the situations and the new realities and then actually build strategies to help yourself pivot through those moments and actually, lift, lead, inspire, and focus and transform your company?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's my question for you now.
Mm-hmm.
So we just stated the problem. But like you said, I mean, the unthinkable is unthinkable, meaning that something's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. And it's something that is unexpected. And then it happens. And how do you navigate? Walk me through that, whether it's lift or something else. How do you navigate? You come into that situation, it needs to be turned around. What are the first things that you look for and do?
Well, certainly it's going to be the moral situation within the company, the vision, the values, the ethical position of the company. Because oftentimes when things aren't going well in a company, they've lost their way. There's always going to be an issue with the vision. It's either gone away, it's now words on a wall, or it's the old guy's vision and not the new regime's vision. So you've got to go through and do a full reset because the organization's been pained because that vision has either expired or drifted away, or the market realities have caused a whole new situation. And now you haven't updated your vision and you updated your strategy. So you have to go back to those sort of fundamental basics. And that, of course, is going to be required because you got to really enable your people to start engaging in the business and then finding out how all this market data and all these realities or how the customers are now behaving or what has now changed within the priorities of your customers. Getting that information is going to require you really sparking your people to start engaging in a full refresh of the vision, refresh of the business plan, refresh of the realities or the assumptions you've made about your end markets, hearing the customer's voice, understanding what the new needs are, understanding what's happening in your supply base or some of your raw material bases, and then taking that sort of situational refresh, getting the values of vision and the direction figured out, and then starting to translate that into the end markets. And then you have to look at what is your core competency, because of course every strategy is critical, but it requires you to either go one or two steps away from your core, which then creates risk. Okay, what is that risk, and how do I build a risk profile and mitigation strategy to make sure that, okay, if I'm going to take new products to existing customers, okay, we know those people, but there's risk because maybe they don't want it. Okay, how do we mitigate that risk? How do we get those new offerings to the customer? But if it's a new customer and a new product, now you're two or three or four steps away, and it may be a new market in a new geography. Well, the risk profile starts to escalate quite quickly. Doesn't mean you don't do it necessarily, but you want to try, if you're going to make a shift in a pivot in business, you want to start with one step away from your core. Maybe a new product in an existing market, that would be great. But if you have to go with a refreshed product in a new market, well, that's a different risk. But you've got to be able to really build your risk profiles and make sure that you don't leverage the future of the company on it. Like, you've got to be careful with your balance sheet because cash is going to be very precious. There's going to be a lot of people looking for capital in the next couple of years. And if you're going to need a lot of infusion of capital, you're going to have to find that capital from within your own company. If you have to go outside to source it, you want to be a position of leverage and not being just taking whatever you can get at high interest rates. So you want to be prepared. You want to prepare your balance sheet to actually ask for capital, and that requires you to do a lot of work on your own existing cost structure. So it's a multi-pronged, multifaceted approach, but there's a method in there, and it's called LIFT, and it's in the book.
All right, they got to get the book. You said something while you were walking us through, how you look at it, what you do. I'd like you to expound on a little bit. You said companies are going to be looking for capital in the future. You mentioned before that, you talked about, just supply chain issues, silicon, the 50 years of overall wait time. All of these things impact supply chains, impact profit and loss statements. The government has been, not just the government of the United States, but all governments all over the world, they've been flooding the markets with cash, printing it, quote unquote, making digits appear out of thin air. What do you see as the immediate future, next 1 to 2 years, and then the longer term future, 5 to 10 years coming from this that people need to be aware of?
Well, certainly there's going to be a natural, unfortunately, culling of some businesses through this process. And it's a couple things. One, you had an arbitrary sort of inflating of some companies that probably would have fell into insolvency, but because of government funding and stimulus money, were able to, live to another day. The unfortunate part is that, once that balloon empties, then it's gone. They'll fall into the bankruptcy that they probably should have went into in the first place. But then there's good companies that still have a vibrant business plan, but they were too slow to act. And we've seen this right out of the gate of COVID. Like we all thought, okay, I'll flatten the curve a couple of weeks, right? Well, they didn't deal with their cost structure. They let the government money come in to help with, keeping those people employed, but they didn't need those people, but they had the money access. And so they kept them around, but yet the business started to change and the needs started to change, but they kept thinking, okay, well, the curtain's going to open again and things are going to change. And I don't want to take too much action. I'll lose too many good people. And so there was a lack of urgency on changes. And what did that do? Ultimately, it ended up eroding the balance sheet, because when you have to fundamentally make that kind of change, it typically costs you money to make that change. Sometimes in the form of severance, like you're getting rid of certain people, or you need to hire certain people, but you got to put out cash to make certain changes in the business. But if you're sitting going, okay, well, I'm getting this government money and I have to, in order to get this money, I have to kind of keep things the way they are, then you arbitrarily delay what you should be doing now. Yeah. And so what we've seen, I think, in the first 12 months was a lot of people kind of sitting on their hands, but just kind of hoping that everything would kind of go back. Yeah. Well, then after 6 months, you go, okay, well, it's not going back, but I've got all these people, and we're starting to hear customers might, things might improve. And then there was this long delay. So there's going to be a number of companies as the stimulus packages all start dropping off, then all of a sudden now they didn't do the work they should have did during this period. Now they have pretty good businesses, but now they're too fat and they've got to now make changes, but their balance sheet's eroded. And now all of a sudden, now they're in a liquidity crisis and now they're looking for capital. So the second part of that problem, which I think gets exacerbated, is that they're not the only ones looking for capital. Now you're going to have a rush for capital because all the government money is now gone. And then all of a sudden now the bar for who gets what is now raised because
too high. Yeah.
Institutions now say, okay, you know what? You got to be operating cash positive. You got to be this. You got to have these kind of debt to equity ratios and so on and so forth. They can kind of be a little bit selective and picky about who they lend to. But if you're the one looking for the money, all of a sudden now you got many parties at the table, and all of a sudden now your position is far weaker in what you can ask for and what you can expect. So I think the problem is going to get really magnified in the next 24 months. The unfortunate part, and to answer your longer term question, is that there'll probably be some really good companies that go away because they weren't prepared for this, and that's going to be to the benefit of their competitors because someone's going to have to eat up that space, and those opportunities will be lost by those companies. So unfortunately, we'll probably see some good companies just caught in this sort of vortex for a period of time, and they just don't have the balance sheet to weather it.
Well, they need to hire you as quickly as possible to begin making the changes and adjustments that are needed. So, no, this is good. This is intriguing stuff. I mean, you've done this at the highest level. You've done this with the biggest asset manager in the world, Blackstone. So it's really interesting to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I'm a small business owner, but hey, my business is important to me and all of my staff and all of my clients. And so, I've seen, I guess being small allows you to be nimble, and we were nimble. We were quick to act, which I think, enabled us and allowed us to have, a great year in 2020 and what is shaping up to be a fantastic year in 2021. So yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm hearing mainly out of everything you shared is to be able to make the hard decisions and make them quickly, because the longer you stall, even though you may have cash in the bank or you may have government subsidies, you're just going to end up having to make those decisions. And by then it may be too late to actually do that. So very, very, very good. I mean, thank you. It's getting an education here, which is always kind of fun for me and for those listening. So let me pivot for just a moment because we've given them a lot to think about. I always like to ask, either for those that have had their book out for a certain length of time, what are you using your book? How are you using your book to grow your consulting business, to get build authority, get your name out, et cetera. Your book has only been out for a short period of time, but it's already done so exceptionally well, again, hitting Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the bestseller list, all of that. So I'll ask you a different question. What would you say or tell somebody who has 30 years of experience like you and is thinking of writing a book, thinking of pivoting, and it doesn't have to be 30 years, you know what I mean, but they have an expertise, they're thinking of pivoting, they're thinking of writing the book. What would you tell them? And also, what would you tell them about how to actually look for somebody to really help you with the marketing and the publishing of that book?
No, thanks for the question. When I started, as I said, I always had this desire to write a book, and I really wanted to take a lot of my, experiences, and it's part of your legacy. You want to, sort of put the pin in on the things that you've done. And there's nothing like writing a book that really helps you put that sort of line in the sand. Okay, here's my life up until this point, and here's the difference I've made. Here's the things I've learned. And then here's what I want others to glean and enjoy and experience and understand as well. And if there's a way to give back into the past for those who want to pay it forward, it's a great milestone. Yeah. But when you have a set of expertise like I have, one of them is not writing books and publishing them. Right. And so there's an element of, when I walked into the project, I was like, okay, I could write. I wrote lots of chapters. I crystallized my methodology. I thought through some, very deep concepts and tried to simplify it to my audience. But it's one thing to put a bunch of papers together, and 450 pages my book is, as you know, it's a bit of a longer one, but taking that to actually production and publishing is a completely different animal for sure. And it's not an expertise that I had. And one of the things I did learn over my course of time was that when I didn't have the expertise, I got that expertise. I had many subject matter experts come in to help me when I faced a situation that I knew needed to be fixed or improved, or we needed that, level of expertise to help us, accomplish that goal or hit that milestone. And so I was never afraid to go out and get expertise to help me with the next leg of that journey that helped us get to that end goal. And so that was what it took for me when I realized, okay, I wanted to write a book, but who do I get as a partner? And so when I went out there looking for partners to help me, Bestseller Publishing and yourself, Rob, and we talked early on in the process there, I was just very, admiring of your expertise, and as well with your organization, what you've built. It's an end-to-end solution, and it's for those, that need other aspects, like you provide a lot of services and really equip someone that has expertise to actually take that expertise out and then put that into action, and then help them get their book out onto the world's stage. And so I think, I thank you for that. For first and foremost, you guys did a fantastic job, and I was glad when I picked you, and I'm glad on the other side of it that you were able to deliver on everything you promised, and I really appreciated all that you and your team did for me.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm honored. I think your book, it does put a pin in it, so to speak, as you said. And I think it is going to be an incredible foundation for you as a consultant, helping, tons of other businesses to do the very thing that you've been doing for the last 30 years. So I'm glad we could play a small part in that, and, really honored to be working with you. So thank you for that. Let's give a link. I mean, where can people learn a little bit more about you, about the LIFT process, maybe get a copy of the book? Where's the best place to send them?
Yeah, so randydewey.com is the best place to go. You can get to the book funnel there, and that'll give you a lot of information, help you get a pretty inexpensive copy of it. Good. So that's a great place to go. And then, of course, the website's full of stuff. But also, you can find me all over LinkedIn. That's certainly this platform that I spend quite a bit of my energy on. So between LinkedIn and my website at randydewey.com, you can learn all about me and the LIFT process.
Love it. So randydewey.com, and Dewey is DEWEY.com. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, as you mentioned as well. So thank you, my friend. Thanks for being on today and sharing your wisdom. Great to have you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.